A word from our sponsors. Philo Ads brings performance-focused CTV advertising to brands of every size. With over 900 million ad impressions each month, no minimum spend, and a brand-safe environment, Philo Ads makes it easy to scale your campaigns with confidence. Ready to see how Philo Ads can work for you? Head to ads.philo.tv. That's ads.philo.tv to get started today.
This podcast is brought to you by AudioHook, the leading independent audio DSP. AudioHook has direct publisher integrations into all major podcast and streaming radio platforms, providing 40% more inventory than what could be accessed in omnichannel DSPs. What's more, AudioBook has full transcripts on more than 90% of all podcast inventory, enabling advanced contextual targeting and brand suitability. AudioHook is so confident that in addition to CPM buys, they offer the industry's only pay-for-performance option where brands can scale audio and podcasting with peace of mind knowing they are only paying for outcomes. Visit audiohook.com to learn more. That's audiohook.com.
Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTech God. Welcome to the AdTech God Pod, where we speak to those connecting complex things in the advertising industry. Today, I'm joined by Zach Lain, the Director of Global Data Partnerships at PepsiCo. Zach has an impressive background, having worked at Dow Jones, ZeoTap, and now PepsiCo. He's also an advisory board member at OpenX and AdExchanger. Zach and I have some mutual friends, and so I'm looking forward to finding out if he's as nice as they say he is. Zach, welcome to the AdTech God Pod.
Thanks, ATG. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for accepting the invite. Thanks for liking my my Instagram posts. I appreciate every like I get there.
I'm actually sitting, I hope it's not offensive, I'm sitting on the AdTech God pillow right now. It's quite comfortable for my desk.
Oh, that's right. You got one of those. Security tried to grab you on the way out, but didn't work.
They did, but I'm fast, so.
But you're fast. Like I'm agile. I just made it right out of there. Nobody caught me. Zach, I'm a fan of yours. I've heard you speak. I've heard you post. I've heard you on other podcasts. I'm really intrigued by where you sit in the space. Historically, I speak to a lot of ad tech. I speak to maybe some publishers. It's rare I get a brand on here. And I think it's really important to hear the perspective of someone who's working at such a well-known name. So you work on global data partnerships at Pepsi, but can you take me back to how you got into the advertising industry and what brought you to PepsiCo?
Yeah, it's a good question, ATG. I was doing some kind of soul searching with a friend recently, and where it's like, oh, I guess it does go back kind of far. I got into ad tech via the data side of the house. And if I zoom all the way out, I think I was interested in data long before I knew what that even was. As a kid, I was fascinated by the Chinese language. I love drawing. Like, I think lots of kids like drawing. I really like drawing, and it seemed like people were drawing pictures to communicate. Like, that's cool. I begged my mom to give me Chinese classes. She signed me up for Chinese classes. You quickly learn, that people aren't just drawing pictures. That's not the case. But really captivated me was the structure, the way meaning was layered through logic, through combination. That curiosity, how information is organized and can be organized, led me to study law in China. I have a law degree from Peking University in Beijing, and eventually into the deeper and wider data and media space. It's a super linear path, as you can probably tell here. My first industry role was at Dow Jones, where I worked on the real-time data products that we powered with the Wall Street Journal. Had to understand where the data broke, which it broke all the time, how it was used downstream, and how it powered the variety of different partner systems and platforms that this data was feeding into. It was a crash course, if you will. I heard a friend call it technical empathy, and sort of just like IT overall. It was one of those, I think we all probably have one of those, a real blood, sweat, and tears type of role. Since then, I've worked across, you mentioned a few of them. I've worked across startups. I've worked across big brands, hands-on keys roles, keeping the pipes open, roles selling cookieless IDs, roles running data partnerships to power all things programmatic. But I think the thread that ties it together, and I kind of connect it to my childhood experience, is this desire to understand how things really work. My inner child that really loved drawing coming in. I think for ad tech, for me, has always been a space where that type of curiosity can really thrive.
It's funny, your profile says connecting complex things, and that's why I put it on the intro.
I love it.
I thought it was interesting. Data is pretty complex. It's also changing a lot. And the in-depth amount of data you're able to collect and what is not important is also a huge factor. How have you seen things change over the last few years, whether at PepsiCo or prior? And what are some of the, I guess, highlights of your learnings over the last few years?
I think one thing I want to highlight is not one item or one victory per se. It's really one arc, at PepsiCo. My focus has been building frameworks that let us pilot, embed, and scale new data, new solutions, new platforms, honestly, new ways of thinking responsibly. So they're not just used once, but used well across the 200 plus markets that PepsiCo operates. Every time I say that out loud, it still kind of shocks me. That's a wild amount of truly global reach. So, that includes making sure new data sets don't just get adopted, but actually deliver value in ways that can be measured, often overlooked. But, if we take that and zoom out a little bit, that mentality and zoom out, how do we think about embedding best practices across measurement, across attribution, attention, SBO, curation, all the buzzwords that our industry likes to bandy about, right? But how do we do it in a holistic way, cross-brand, cross-market? For me, the success I've enjoyed isn't really the destination per se, but it sounds a little cliche, but it's really the journey and the results on that journey that have engendered both now and will in the future that I think I'm most proud of.
Okay, so as a Pepsi drinker, sorry, any other beverage companies that may listen, as a Pepsi drinker, I'm curious as to what elements of the data are important, because loyalty to brand is one thing, and obviously that's information that you would somehow utilize based off of the collection methods that you have from whatever point of sale or your retail locations and the phone number association with those retail locations. But how is that utilized to improve your media performance? Do you utilize any of that to improve your return on ad spend?
Yeah, you're exactly right, ATG. I think our challenge, to highlight what I said before, is really, how do we use the data in the most effective way? There's not a lack of data signals out there. There's a data utility problem out there. We have plenty of data. We have plenty of signals that can lead to smart decision making, but it's about, is the data in the right format, the right language? Is it in the right silo? Almost always the answer is absolutely not. So all of those things you mentioned and absolutely more, but it's more than just the size of the data lake, right? It's the tools, the governance, the stewardship models that accompany it, the taxonomy, Then you have to have the folks and the technical know-how and the work stream. So it's the data, absolutely, the integrity and quality and quantity of the signals, absolutely important, but the scaffolding that supports it, the people, just the technical workflows, the know-how is absolutely critical. I think I talked to a lot of folks where, I think data lakes often become data swamps when it's focused solely on the signal and sort of maximizing the signal. But it's really about the scaffolding and the processes underneath that I think, are key to my role and key to folks that I work with at PepsiCo.
When you look at what you do day to day, I'm pretty sure when you were younger, you weren't thinking wow, I would love to work with data. Nothing makes me happier. But
maybe I was.
Really? Were you? I don't know. I would. Yeah. But the data you're able to collect, how does that, from your perspective, reinforce, I guess, your need for creativity, your fascination with art and ads and advertising? Do you feel that something inside you, when you see this data, triggers something in your brain where you're wow, this is really cool. I can see how this is flowing. And how do I make it better? And what do I pick to target? And what do I pick to collect?
It's a great question. I think it kind of gets to the core of what we as an industry are trying to balance. How do you balance the science of analytics with the creative side of marketing, if you will, right? And I think that's always, we just came up with Cannes. I think that's actually a great example of it. It's a creativity festival at its core, but it's also a festival of commercial activity, right? So how do we find that balance? And I think that balance is evolving. It's not, we use data, and obviously I'm the data guy in a lot of rooms I'm in. Data shouldn't just optimize that performance. It has to fuel it. I think it helps us understand. Obviously, this is a rocket science here, but helps us understand people, uncover insights we might not have seen otherwise, and just honestly tell better stories. So I think at the end of the day, effective marketing can't feel like it came from an algorithm. It has to feel emotional and real. Data helps us get there, but creativity is what makes it stick. And but honestly, ATG, just to kind of pick upon the Cannes reference recently, coming back from Cannes, I saw Lucas Gala speak at Cannes and talk about how we're entering this third age of creativity, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like, ooh, this sounds like a good LinkedIn buzzword, but also like, truly, I mean that in like a positive, really cool way. Like, where technology isn't just enabling media delivery, but fundamentally, fueling the process itself. At Cannes, I saw this really, so this is just me nerding out here. I saw this really cool.
I love it.
I saw this really cool company called Springboards, which showcase generative hallucination tools for creative ideation. So it's purposely using AI to generate surprising, even inaccurate things to spark new creative direction. Kind of, in my mind, it kind of flips I don't think there's a paradigm yet, but flips the so-called paradigm on, policing AI errors, instead treats them as creative assets. I had never once thought of that, never once considered that. So, fascinating play at like this intersection of analytics and marketing here. There's tons of other interesting innovations happening in this space. I think Nova is doing really cool stuff. But yeah, that balance between, creativity, marketing, analytics, that sort of like three-way soup, if you will, is in flux and honestly just super cool.
It's funny you mentioned the hallucination thing. It was in the Refresh newsletter. I highlighted it. And I think I called it hallucination as a service, HAS.
Oh, I did not see that, but that's awesome.
Yeah, it just came out this morning, and I was like laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh, now there's a way to take advantage of the hallucinations it creates, which is endless creativity, and to kind of lean into the errors and like, sure, like maybe there's something wrong there, but it's kind of cool.
That like bleeding edge of machine creation and human creation is fascinating to me. And, this is, awesome. I'm going to start using HAS now. So thank you.
I'm going to trademark it. But yeah, HAS, hallucination as a service, sounds like it's
you heard it here first, folks.
You heard it here first. I'm buying the domain right now. When you look at the overall experience that you had at Cannes, and I'll just ask you about Cannes, what your experience was. I know that we personally as Marketecture had a great time. What is it about Cannes that really sets it apart from other events in the space, outside of being in just a beautiful setting? But where do you feel that Cannes has filled a void for the industry that, makes it worth attending and being there with everybody?
This won't be shocking to anyone, but it's so true though. There's one takeaway that I always come back from Cannes with, is that one, I always walk away never wanting to drink rosé again because you get that weird mossy feeling on your teeth. But joke aside, it's like people power the partnerships, not the tech. And we talk a lot about the cool stuff. It's genuinely the people. The strongest relationships I've built and, are ones, it's not only about grabbing drinks with or like exchanging contact QR codes or when you touch the top of your iPhones and you can exchange contact information like that. They're forged in whiteboard sessions. Real partnership to me has to be cumulative. So, not to plug Cannes too much as an event, but it really is a celebration of these types of cumulative partnerships that the event really shines in. So, I think my personal playbook, and I think a lot of folks similarly as well, is to show up consistently, bring value, stay curious. Easy 1, 2, 3, that builds and compounds trust in a better way than a LinkedIn post, to be honest. And I think Cannes does a really great job of revealing these cumulative partnerships honestly in a really cool setting. But yeah, it's a great venue to kind of unsheath these partnerships that have been in the work, like these human partnerships, these human connections that have been in the works for months, years, even longer. So yeah, it's a great event.
What are some things in the industry that you're excited about, Zach? I get a lot of people talking about AI. We talked about, HAS a few minutes ago. I'm going to use that everywhere.
I love
HAS
it.
A few minutes ago. Connected television is always hot. AI is always hot. But is there something in the space that you feel is really interesting to you? And maybe even, you don't have to say their name, but maybe solutions in the market that you're like, wow, this is really like incredible.
Yeah, I have two answers to this, ATG. And one's kind of more thematic. And one is definitely, I think, like an underhyped trend. It's a little bit less sexy, but and they're very different. I'll touch on both a little bit. I think, everyone talks about, or has for the last few years, been talking about clean rooms. I am super bullish on clean rooms, especially when you pair them with federated data sharing models, very much in my wheelhouse. They're foundational and they have to be table stakes going forward. The holy grail, albeit probably a bit aspirational, is that they allow us to keep data decentralized while unlocking, et cetera, unlocking smarter measurement, better attribution, safer data activation. It's great. In the same way that cloud became a baseline infrastructure for software, clean rooms have to become the baseline for media and data collaboration. I think AI is exciting, and obviously that's more than exciting. It's here, it's giant. But, AI needs clean signal, and I think clean rooms are where, this signal gets defined. I've had lots of conversations, with the Habu folks, with Lauren Wetzel and the folks at InfoSum and what they're doing. Really, really cool stuff on both of those. And I think, secondly, the other thing that is totally different that I wanted to touch on that I think is a cool innovation or maybe like an underhyped trend to some degree is the cultural shift happening inside large organizations. I think for me, and I think I have a good perch internally at a very large company to see this, success was measured by so-called vanity metrics, right? Click-through, reach, delivery rates, et cetera. Now I'm seeing a shift toward business outcomes. I feel like outcomes is one of the words du jour now, right? My stakeholders are asking different questions. Did this accelerate demand velocity? Did this move a high value segment? XYZ. This isn't rocket science, right? This isn't crazy.
No,
here.
It's not, but it's important.
But it's super important. That shift changes everything we do. It changes how we brief campaign. It chooses how we choose partners. It chooses how we invest in data and create a constellation of vendors that we work with. So, I said this, I was at this Stream TV event in Denver a week before Cannes a few weeks ago, and one of the things that I talked about there was that we have to resist the temptation to declare victory over metrics that don't matter. And I'm seeing that more and more shift, that the glacier is starting to melt. In this case, it's a good thing. Internally, I'm seeing my stakeholders upskill, evolve. So it's this cultural shift. I feel like I've never really heard anybody talk about this. Maybe it's a prominent brand perspective here, but it's something that I think is extremely impactful and will change how big brands like ours kind of interact with the wider ecosystem.
Well, October 27th is Marketecture Live Outcomes Conference. So
amazing.
We are also seeing the value there. I posted something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about like outcomes are not new. Like, how is this ever not a core focus? Like, we should have been focusing on this, but I think we get blinded. I think everybody gets blinded. Like,
we do.
What was your click-through rate? Like, what was, but what's the actual outcome of this campaign? What are you actually driving here? Everything else backs out into those other vanity metrics. Sure.
Totally.
Like, you need those to understand how you had that outcome, but the focus really moved away for a long time. And so it's good to hear it's back.
I totally agree. I think, there's vanity metrics, if you will. They play a role. They can tell us how efficiently we spent money. Great. But they don't actually connect with how efficiently did we actually move the needle on, outcomes, things that really matter. So yeah, totally agree there. Awesome.
You mentioned clean signal, and I don't think I've ever thought about that, and probably never considered the importance of a clean signal for AI specifically. Like, sure, we want clean signals, but I never considered that. How much of a focus is that for Pepsi to just, make sure, or for yourself in your day-to-day job? How important are clean signals, and what's the challenge around it? And what's the positive and negative impact of signal for what you do?
It won't surprise anybody, but for a company like ours, clean signal is absolutely imperative. We don't have a lot of direct touch points with the end consumer, right? So our first party data generation strategy, a huge tenet of our data strategy in general, is about, understanding the consumer in new and novel ways. So that means we need to understand more about them directly. We have a lot. We do have a lot of first party data, but transparently, we are always on the quest to improve the quality of it, right? How many people are downloading XYZ app or doing, entering their email in XYZ promotion. So the integrity, the viability of the signal is absolutely key. So, we're doing a lot in clean room environments. We're doing a lot of deduplication. We're doing a lot of cleansing with other identity stacks with some of our trusted partners. So absolutely key. And I think clean rooms help us get there. There's other tools in the toolkit as well here, but just to kind of hype up clean rooms a little bit, we use them as a trusted source, not just for matching data sets, but, we're starting to dabble in like, how do we do more activation from? How do we do more measurement and planning in? So it's this sort of one-stop shop, or at least we are aiming for it to be.
Where in the industry, it's so different talking to a brand because your perspective is so different. So my question for you is, when you look at the overall direction of the digital advertising industry, whether it's policy changes, whether it's data collection practices, whether it's AI, whether it's consolidation in the space, you may have, less partners to work with in the future. Maybe you don't, maybe you will. But what keeps you going, and what is something an ad tech vendor today that's listening to this, because there are a lot of them that listen, what do they need to do to catch your ear and catch your attention rather than maybe blind emails and, DMs on LinkedIn?
There are two big topics, two thematic topics that I think about a lot. I don't want to say they give me trouble falling asleep, but, I speak about a lot at different events. So anything that can touch to these certainly sparks my interest. And again, we can probably break these down into different lenses of privacy, attribution, you name it. But two things that I think, ad tech is going in the next few years that will definitely catch my eye is about, federated data collaboration. That has to be that. I don't want to say it will be the norm for, next generation of marketing, but, we at PepsiCo are moving from bilateral, even multi-party partnerships to more holistic clean room environments where media measurement, retail signals, you name it, all can converge. Planning, analytics, aren't going to be separate anymore. And they're going to begin to happen in that same collaborative space. So, these mutual models for decision making, I heard someone say that mutual model for decision making, it's like, ooh, I love that, is a structural leap. I don't want to say it's a structural leap forward, but it's a structural leap from how we operate now, from just simply matching data sets. So, anything that kind of speaks to this, will always be top of mind for me. And secondly, very differently, but something that I personally am very passionate about, and I've talked to a lot of different vendors at Cannes and elsewhere about it, is ad fraud. Ad fraud is not a very sexy topic, but it's evolving faster than detection. And, we have to keep up. I saw maybe like half a year ago, Mark Zagorski and Oren Hoffman on Oren Hoffman's podcast. He has a great anecdote about the risk is eroded trust, right? It's not just wasted spend, which is obviously mammoth. We can't solve for this one vendor at a time. We have to have industry-wide pressure from industry-wide groups. You know who you are, for enforceable standards, right? Brands, pubs, platforms. There has to be some sort of shared incentive here to keep the channel clean. Otherwise, I think at best, we're just playing whack-a-mole here with problems that will never fully uproot. So ATG, to your point about, things that kind of keep me up at night and, what would pique my interest, these types of big thematic conversations of federated data collaboration and the very unsexy topic of fraud are very, very top of mind. So anything can touch that will always catch my attention.
It's funny, you touched up on the fraud piece. Like, the banking sector has a know your business policy, right? Yep. Like they have to have access to who the person is, the individual that has the bank account, where the money's coming from, so that they can, track and monitor whether there's anything happening that's not kosher. When we talk about advertising, like it's very rare, right? Like there is no formal body that monitors that outside of truly the banking system. And one thing that is a concern to me is that a lot of the inventory itself, a lot of the inventory that is not real or is spoofed or is not of a high quality is pretty easily detectable by being selective with your partners. It's like,
yes,
taking a look at where you're buying, having a very buttoned up allow list, making sure that you recognize the names, confirming the whatever the bundle IDs are, the channels are, the formats that are coming through. A lot of it can be cleaned up with some minimal effort, which is why in one aspect I make fun of SPO often. And I say, oh, well, great. Congratulations. Like, here's your SPO strategy. Like, fantastic. But the reality is that a lot of the SPO and the curated trends just come down to, can you give me better data, better lists, like clean up the list. And if that's focused on, a lot of it will be cut out. But I think a lot of the lists that are out there are huge. And there's still 20, 30,000, line items, which nobody can spot check with their eyes. But hopefully they get reduced. I think most of the spend comes through a few handfuls. publishers.
I totally agree. I think, there's, not to like echo some other parts necessarily, but it's like a lot of this isn't rocket science. I think we know what we need to do. It's sort of the prisoner's dilemma a little bit. We all kind of have to act in concert, and it's just not, for a variety of reasons, financially, certainly operationally. There's just a large barrier to entry for this sort of joint effort. But, that's a problem for tomorrow, I guess.
That's a different, we'll have that on a different podcast. That's a different
pod. Yeah.
We'll do a different pod. Okay. Last question for you, because I know you travel a lot and I've seen you all over the world, which is pretty incredible that you get to do that. What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't working in this industry? Like, what are you truly passionate about? And where do you find your time or your mind wandering to, wishing you were doing?
Oh, in another life / hopefully when I don't live in New York City, when it's a little bit cheaper to do, I would be a pilot. Easy. I love flying. I think a lot of my travel and my interest in travel, I've been to Germany, mentioned something, the country, and it was 94 or something. This is great. And I love traveling. I also love flying. I love being at the airport. I love,
Really?
I don't want to say I love TSA
on that one,
but I love that feeling of just like, wow, you could fall asleep and be in the other side of the world. So, when I don't live in New York and have to go out to Teterboro or something like ridiculously expensive for me to get a pilot's license, maybe if I move to Florida or something, then I can do it. So I would 100%, without any hesitation, I would be a pilot.
That's it. PepsiCo data division in Miami, Florida.
Easy.
Sold.
That's awesome.
Zach, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to PepsiCo for having you as my guest. I really do appreciate your time. And thank you,
ATG. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTech God Pod, a podcast for the people, about the people. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on the latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.